Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
LeBron James has opted into his player option and sends a message to the Lakers management. Also, the Timberwolves are signing big pieces back to Minnesota, and the Lions are about to get thrown off the NFC cliff.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
LeBron James has opted into his player option and is monitoring the Lakers roster carefully. Locked On Lakers host Brian Kamenetsky breaks down the positives and negatives of the move.
This was Sunday morning was crazy. Like I wake up and I'm like, oh yeah, it's opt-in day. Like we got to figure this stuff out. And all of a sudden, LeBron opts in. That part was kind of expected. And if he'd opted in with nothing else, we'd all be going about our days as if nothing had happened. And then later in the show, we'll talk about this because from a practical standpoint, in terms of what your Los Angeles Lakers roster looks like next season, the news that followed that Dorian Finney-Smith is not going to pick up his $15 million option and will instead enter free agency, that has a much bigger chance to impact what the team looks like, certainly in the near term, than LeBron's thing. But LeBron is LeBron. So let's start with LeBron. What was your news? And we'll get to the Rich Paul quotes. What was your reaction to the news here when you saw it?
So like you said, I think that as we were projecting what this summer was going to look like, I think this was it just seemed like the most logical option for all parties involved. Just getting the notification that LeBron James was going to opt in was as expected as anything else that could have happened mechanism wise this summer. And every discussion I've had, every podcast I've listened to, every kind of thought process I've had about this offseason included LeBron opting in. So like you said, I think comparing it to the DFS news is definitely interesting because the DFS news was the one that really I didn't have a handle on, and it was going to have a big impact on what they do. But what followed LeBron's opt-in is what has changed the complexity of this morning, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is. And so if you missed it, nice setup. If you missed it, the quotes from Rich Paul to ESPN, LeBron wants to compete for a championship. He knows the Lakers are building for the future. He understands that, but he values a realistic chance of winning it all. We are very appreciative of the partnership that we've had for 8 years with Jeannie and Rob and consider the Lakers as a critical part of his career. We understand the difficulty in winning now while prepping for the future. We do want to evaluate what's best for LeBron at his stage in his life and career. He wants to make every season he has left count. The Lakers understand that and are supportive of what's best for him. I mean, so much to unpack. I mean, the efficiency of Rich Paul in here of packing news into a very small space is to be commended.
A lot of past tense.
Right? There's very little about the future. The past tense thing is really what struck me.
Yep.
Is everything appreciative of the partnership we've had. He knows the Lakers are rebuilding for the future, which may be news, by the way, to Luka. So, I mean, this is top. These guys have been at it for a while, but it just goes to show this is top shelf work from LeBron and his management team in terms of these types of statements.
You know, I'll say this. I think in reading the quotes, there have been quotes from the Rich Paul camp, specifically around Anthony Davis wanting a set happened in previous years that I wouldn't say bothered me. That's not the right word, but it's like, oh, this stings. Like whatever is, this is clearly a stinging message being sent across the bow. I didn't read this in that way. And maybe it has a little bit to do with the Lakers' future is sort of settled in a way with Luka's presence. And my assumption is that Luka is here for the long run. And he obviously indicated positively about the ownership change, etc. And so I read those quotes, and my kind of thought process was, I agree with everything that's being listed here. Like, I don't think Rich Paul said anything that I disagree with. A lot of this and a lot of the reaction to this news, I think, depends on how realistic you are about the Lakers' current situation, where they rank in terms of being a contender, being in the West, where they actually slot in, and B, how realistic the options are for them to improve this summer. And we have to keep in mind when we talk and when like Rich Paul talks about the Lakers building for the future, at LeBron's age and his stage in his career, where even if he doesn't declare it and plan on it, this could be his last season for what he, right? It just, he has been at that stage now for at least a year, probably 2 years, where he could enter that season, maybe not planning on it, but it could end up being his last season as a basketball player. So his conception and his vision of what a long-term building looks like could literally mean that, hey, they're going to be ready to contend next offseason. And that even is too long for me to wait. And I would tell LeBron, you're right. That could be too long for you to wait. And so it's like a combination of all of those things. How realistic are you about the Lakers right now? How realistic are you about their chances to improve? And C, how realistic are you if you're LeBron James thinking about how long can you actually wait to really be in the hunt?
You can stay up to date all year on the Los Angeles Lakers by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Lakers on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. For Locked On Sports Today, coming up, the Wolves are bringing back Julius Randle and Naz Reid. Before we get to that, Angel Reese had a historic performance. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events, whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning. FanDuel makes it feel like I am part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5, get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. On the night the Sparks retired Candace Parker's jersey, Angel Reese decided to make a little history of her own. Reese dropped a season-high 24 points and became the first player in WNBA history to post 15-plus rebounds in 4 straight games, finishing with 16 boards, 7 assists, and a statement win over LA. It was a full circle kind of evening. Parker, a Chicago legend who once lifted the sky to a title, watched from the rafters as Reese put the team on her back. If this is the future of the franchise, it's safe to say the torch was passed and caught with 2 hands. Over on the diamond, the Reds walked off the Padres.
Will Benson is a problem. What's up? This is Jeff Carr from the Locked On Reds podcast, and Will Benson has 3 hits and the game-winning walk-off single to get the Reds a victory, 3-2 over the Padres. That's now 6 out of 7 series that the Cincinnati Reds have won. Look, you're not going to win every game in the 162, but if you can win every series, you'll find yourself in the playoffs. The Reds are really starting to put together some momentum here, and it's key that they beat the Padres because the Padres are ahead of them in the wild card race. If they can continue to do this and own the season series against San Diego, that's going to be a huge thing come October. But it was how the Reds won this game. This was an ugly win, and anybody would say that it was an ugly win, but the Reds have not won ugly games these past couple of years. We've been wanting them. We've been begging them to win an ugly game. They lose those games almost exclusively over the last few seasons. To see them pull this win out is absolutely massive, and Will Benson came up with the big hit to get it done.
The Astros shut out the Cubs.
We know how good Framber Valdez is, but it really doesn't matter if it's Skubal, Valdez, or a left-hander that may be a 4th or 5th starter on a team. If you throw the ball with your left hand, you're going to have success against the Chicago Cubs the last month and a half. I'm Sam Olber from the Locked On Cubs podcast. Cubs get shut out in Houston, 2-0. Was not a fan of the way Craig Counsell managed this game in the 5th inning. I thought he pushed Jameson Tyone too far, but you can't really have that takeaway when the team scored 0 runs and just continues to struggle against left-handed pitching. Cubs go 3-4 on this road trip. The goal was to go 4-3, but they need to start stacking some wins here. They need to start getting hot again. They're 11-13 over their last 24. If that's just going to be a blip in the season, which is fine, you got to start stacking wins and getting hot again. They got a homestand after a day off tomorrow against Cleveland. Cleveland and St. Louis. They need to get on a 3-4 game win streak or something to get going, get some rhythm. But it's hard to do that when you can't hit left-handed pitching. They got to figure out a way to solve that, whether it's internally or in the trade market. The time to wait is done. Got to make some moves quick.
And after leading BYU to an 11-win season, quarterback Jake Retzlaff is expected to transfer not because of on-field struggles, but due to an off-field violation of BYU's honor code. Retzlaff reportedly admitted to premarital sex in a legal response to a civil lawsuit, triggering a likely 7-game suspension. While he denies allegations of rape outlined in the suit, his own admission was enough to violate the university's strict standards. BYU has dealt with high-profile honor code cases before, but Retzlaff's comes amid serious legal scrutiny and a looming departure from the school. The Minnesota Timberwolves are making sure they keep as much of their core as possible. Here to talk about that with me is Ben Beacon, the host over at Locked On Wolves. And Ben, this is a Minnesota team that has made the Western Conference Finals in the past 2 seasons. They're looking to get over that hump, and they believe in their core. They signed Naz Reid. They signed Julius Randle to extensions. Let's start off with Naz Reid, a really big success story for Minnesota. Second-round pick has really come on for them, and has affirmed his loyalty to Minnesota, a 5-year, $125 million deal for Naz Reid. Was this an overpay, underpay, just right? Where does this deal fall in terms of how well you think both sides made out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great deal for Naz Reid. There just aren't that many teams with cap space this offseason. So, like, he could have gone to Brooklyn and he could have gone somewhere else and been a starter, but he wasn't going to find this level of probably overall money or length of contract out there anywhere else. So it's a great deal for Naz. It's a good deal for Minnesota. I mean, like you said, they believe in their front court. They believe in their core. And so they went out and actually, like, in year one, he had a player option that he declined in order to sign this. And so he's going to get paid like $7 million more in year one of the deal. But it's ultimately only like 13% of the cap if you look down at projected cap over the next few years. So, like, in year 3 of this deal, when there's options for Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle, who we'll get to in a second, he's only going to be like the 5th highest paid player on the team, which is probably about right. So, could he have gotten paid more in the open market? Probably, but I don't think he would have gotten the length, and he would have had limited options. And so in that sense, the Wolves may have slightly overpaid just because of those limited options. But at the same time, to your point, success story. He's actually an undrafted guy at LSU and worked his way into the rotation over the last few years and won 6th man of the year a couple seasons ago. And so, there's something to be said for sticking with your guys that homegrown talent and rewarding guys that have worked hard. And he's absolutely a huge part of what this team is trying to do. And who knows? I mean, Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert in 2-3 years may not be with the team anymore. And then Naz does become a starter very likely at that point. So, down the road and he'll still only be like in his late 20s. He's only 26 now. And so there is still a little bit of upside there and some security for Naz Reid. So I think it's a win for everybody. It's something that Wolves fans certainly wanted to get done. He's a cult hero in Minnesota, and so everybody's happy it got done so quickly.
And now we know that one of the big pieces in the Karl-Anthony Towns trade was Julius Randle, and he ends up declining his player option, signing a new 3-year, $100 million deal with the Wolves here. So investment in the front court, as you mentioned, Ben. For Julius, what did you see out of him this past year as first in Minnesota? How do you think the short-term fit is, the long-term fit? And are you glad that he's back in Minnesota for everybody?
Yeah, I'm glad he's back. I think, I think the easiest way to say it is, I don't know, like, there's no other better options out there this year anyway. And so, and to your point about the Karl-Anthony Towns trade, yes. I mean, like, if he had opted out and walked, then Minnesota would have only had Dante DiVincenzo with a couple years, at a very team-friendly contract moving forward to show for that trade. Now you also get Julius Randle. It's a very team-friendly deal as well. I mean, he's a multiple-time All-Star. Yes, it's 3 years, $100 million, but it's really a 2-year kind of $70-ish million extension. They rip up the option year. He gets paid virtually the same as what he would have been paid anyway. You add one more year onto that, and then it's a player option in year 3. So if they choose to pivot, they could trade him at the deadline if they wanted to. They could trade him next offseason, and it's a 1 year plus a player option. But in terms of his fit in Minnesota and what he did this year, we saw it in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs against the Lakers and against Golden State, where he can punish mismatches. He can be that second side creator and almost a point forward for Minnesota when Anthony Edwards is loaded up on by the opponent. He struggled obviously in the OKC series, but I mean, who didn't? There's definite pros to what he can bring to the table from an attacking standpoint. And as, again, a second secondary playmaker for Minnesota. And Chris Finch, the Wolves head coach, loves Julius Randle. So there's still wrinkles to be ironed out here. But this was also year one of Randle and Gobert playing together in the front court. So I think, and also Randle and Ant sharing the ball and playing together. So I definitely think we saw some of the fruits of their labor trying to figure this out toward the end of last season. So there's a lot still to look forward to as those guys continue to gel in year two and beyond of Randle in Minnesota.
Now, Ben, I know that you know this. Anyone who covers a sports team knows this, is you just can't keep everybody, especially when you develop well, you make the right moves and the right signings. So Naz Reid and Julius Randle here to stay, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who is turned into a very big piece of that core, the Wolves cap situation, Ben, they were able to get those two under contract. But for Nickeil Alexander-Walker, is this the end of the line for him in Minnesota? What does their cap situation look like? And if it is the end of the line, how can Minnesota replace him, whether it be internally or externally?
Yeah, there's really no way to bring him back. He's going to get at least the mid-level exception, which is 4 times what he was making this year in Minnesota. Minnesota had him on a bargain contract. He is going to go somewhere else, and good for him. He's earned it. He really kind of broke out over the last 2 years, and on the national stage with his defense, especially in the playoffs. So he's going to go somewhere else. And it was always more likely Minnesota was going to say, hey, we got to keep Naz and Randle. They do have a little bit more depth on the wings, certainly, than they do in the front court. Last year's first-round pick, Terrence Shannon Jr., played a little bit in the playoffs, never was a consistent part of the rotation, but was obviously a big-time scorer at Illinois in college, and there's belief he could be a legit 3-and-D guy and kind of fill that role. Nickeil was also basically the backup point guard, kind of by default. So Rob Dillingham, another first-round pick from last year. Both Dillingham and Shannon were first-round picks from Minnesota last year. And he's going to have an opportunity to take the bull by the horns. In my mind, those guys basically split the role and they go from an 8-man rotation to a 9-man rotation. Dillingham is initiated offense and TJ Shannon's kind of the wing defender, transition, kind of demon in transition, wreaking havoc sort of a guy. So I think they're going to kind of recreate what Nickeil does in the aggregate in a way, but one of those guys certainly would have the possibility of breaking out and earning a more consistent rotation role, but they have virtually no cap space and only one roster spot to fill, which very likely will be somebody on a vet minimum contract or maybe slightly more than that.
Stay up to date all year on the Minnesota Timberwolves by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Wolves on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Lions are about to be Mufasa. Detroit Lions are set for a massive fall off in the NFC North. Locked On NFL hosts Tyler Rowland and Ross Jackson break down why Detroit is about to get Mufasa.
Listen, I don't think that Matt is wrong there. Let me say this, though. Ross, we don't get political on this show. This is the most political I'm going to get. Ross just had a bead of sweat go down his head there. What do you mean?
No, it's all good. I trust you.
Growing up, the phrase I heard in politics was the lesser of two evils.
Sure.
And I think you can look at that at a lot of things in life because very few options are pure and perfect and there's no downside to them. Often it's give and take.
Yep.
Well, I think when we talk about NFL coaches, the CEO head coach gives you a lot. And I think there are a lot of, quote unquote, to use Matt's words, nerdy coaches out there, like a Mike McDaniel, maybe like a Kellen Moore in New Orleans, who maybe don't have the leadership qualities that make Dan Campbell and Nick Sirianni and Mike Tomlin and Mike Vrabel great. And you do, if you cross the line too far and you don't have that leadership stuff, you can't be a good head coach. The Kevin O'Connells, the Sean McVays, the Matt LaFleurs, they can walk the line, so to speak. Yeah. But the other side of that is what we might see with Dan Campbell, where you may be a very good leader, but do not discount the nerdy stuff. Do not discount how important play design and play calling and finding the analytics and all of the things that Matt talked about that maybe Dan Campbell doesn't bring to the table. I agree that, some people think those things are more important. Some people think the other things are more important. It's a give and take with both. But to me, at the end of the day, Ross, and you know this about me, and I've had vicious arguments about this point, I will always take the offensive play caller head coach who I hope becomes a leader, because I think this may not be something you agree with, but I think in the industry of football, it's easier to find the leadership qualities, the rah-rah, the I'm a former, I can get you guys. I think that's actually easier to find than the true scheme wizards. I think those are more rare talents. So I will always go with the McVays, the LaFleurs, who may not look like the big Mike Vrabel, Dan Campbell. Come on, man, we're going into battle. Right. They may not have that, but I'd rather take the scheme wizard side of it and hope that that guy is also a leader than go with the leader guy and hope that he can constantly replace other positions on his staff with those balancing acts. I just think it's much easier to do it the offensive way than the Dan Campbell, Mike Vrabel way.
Yeah, just from a business operation standpoint, you don't want to consistently have to rehire, right? You don't want to consistently
always replacing
be in that situation.
OCs. Yeah.
Right. So
look at the Texans right now.
Yeah, exactly.
What happens with D'Amico Ryans in a couple of years?
Right. And so there's a lot of this conversation that deserves to be had and everything like that. And I think that there's, like you said, there's a give and take, there's a compromise to all of it. I don't think, and while I appreciate Matt's positivity, the Hakuna Matata of it all is a little bit too much for me, right? Like there's a little bit too much for me on that, because I do think that this is a big test for Dan Campbell and his longevity. If he proves that he can go out there and hire the right guys, or that he has hired the right guy, bringing over the pass game coordinator from the Denver Broncos, promoting from within over on the defensive side. If those prove to be the right hires, and that's great news for Dan Campbell. It's great news for the Detroit Lions. But as of right now, it has to be a question mark around them. And a lot of what it is that Dan Campbell brought to the offense, by the way, if he did bring anything to the offense, a lot of what he brought, he learned from one of those nerds and one of those offensive guys here in New Orleans from Sean Payton. Like Sean Payton was absolutely that guy. And we watched here in New Orleans a situation where it was a little bit different, but the offensive play caller went away. And then the Saints said, oh, well, we have another guy who was around for a lot of it, and so he could handle it, and then absolutely failed in terms of that situation. And so the idea that, oh, he's been around Ben Johnson and therefore everything just rubbed off, it's a little steep. We have to wait and see how it plays out.
If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we are here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up, are the Knicks ever going to find their next head coach? So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.